Welcome to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast, a peek into the minds and strategies of the world's greatest copywriters, marketers, and persuasion experts. And now, here's your host, Brian Casangina.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast. It's my honor and privilege today to welcome a man who I have followed in the world of copywriting for many years, even since I basically got started in the industry like 15 or 16 years ago, which goes to show how long he's been doing this and how much experience he has in the industry. So our guest today is Carl Galletti. So I'd like to welcome you to call, Carl, and thanks for coming on.
Well, nice to be here, Brian. Happy to do this for you.
Not a problem. I'm sure that you've got plenty of stuff to share with us. So for listeners who are not aware, let's tell them a bit about yourself. But what did you want to cover first?
Well, I'm gonna, I'll give you a brief rundown of, what I've done and where, where I've gone, and then we'll cover some more interesting stuff. But at the end, what I want to do is present a couple things that are useful to anyone listening and interested in copywriting or even writing in general. One is how to be a better copywriter. Or how to be a better writer, period. It could be applied to copywriting, could be applied to novel writing, nonfiction writing, comedy writing, any kind of writing that you want to do. And the other thing is, I'll tell you something that's better than money. How's that?
Better than money.
So those two things will take about 5 minutes. We'll do that at the end.
Oh, I can't wait for those.
Okay, so to just get started, give you a brief rundown. I got interested in copywriting way back. I forget the year. We don't want to know the year, then you'll know how old I am. But I got interested in copywriting because at the time I was doing some real estate business. I was a real estate broker, salesperson. And I went to these seminars, and I noticed, there were a lot of people at the seminars. They were charging, I don't know, $400 or $500 for it was a single day seminar. I counted up the room, and I thought, gee, there are a lot of people here. That's a lot of money. I wonder how much it costs to actually put on one of these things. And I thought, well, what if I hired a speaker? How much could they charge? It's only one day, right? So and I got extravagant with that, put a $2,000 or $3,000 on it. And then I figured, how much could it cost to rent this room? It's only, this room, okay, it's not that big. I mean, well, it's pretty big, but it's, how much can that cost? And, it seemed to me that there was a lot of money left over. And I figured, well, where could all the costs go? And I finally narrowed it down to, the thing to make something like that work was the promotion. And how do you get a successful promotion? That the question went through my mind. And I had actually studied a little copywriting before this. I read David Ogilvy's Confessions of an Advertising Man prior to that. And I had sort of dipped my foot into a little copywriting and advertising with a little project that got a really good response, like a 4% response from this is an educational based product. And so I thought, that's what I need to study. So I was looking into it, and I used to get Entrepreneur Magazine, and in the back they had all these courses, and I used to go over them and lust over the ones that I wanted to get. And then finally I decided, okay, you know what, I'm gonna get one of these courses. I saw one on how to create a seminar business, right? So then I started, adding one or two, kind of narrowed it down to maybe 3 courses, I think, that I wanted out of all the ones. And I called them up on the phone and I said, I want to order this course. And these 3 courses, and they said, have we got a deal for you? Not actually in those words, but have we got a deal for you? Turns out that we're having this special, and for just a little bit more money, we can give you this whole package of courses in these big binders, and we give you some optional courses, and you can pick those as your optional courses. Actually, I think 1 or 2 of them were in the main package, and the other one was a throw-in that you can pick from a number of things. So I went for that, and because of that, I got on, because the guy who actually engineered that whole thing was Jay Abraham. So I bought that, and because of that, Jay Abraham sent me a promotion for his newsletter. And this is your Marketing Genius at Work newsletter. And it was $500 for a year, and he didn't promise to go on beyond that. And I thought, I never spent $500 for a newsletter in my life. But man, I read the sales letter he sent to me, and I thought, wow, this guy is fantastic. He makes $2,000 an hour consulting on a phone. I want to know everything he knows, and not only that, I want to know everyone he learned from, because I want to learn from those things too. Turns out one of his main things was scientific advertising, which he actually printed in that newsletter. It was more than a regular newsletter. When you say newsletter, you think of like an 8-pager or whatever. This was like a variable from month to month, but some of them were 40, 50 pages long. Wow. It went over a year. I still have it in a loose leaf binder. But anyway, and because of that, and I'd look forward every month to that newsletter coming. And as soon as it would come in the mail, I'd read it from cover to cover as soon as I got it, and I start studying and implementing from that. But then a couple months after that, I had signed up and started the newsletter. I got this other letter from Gary Halbert. Now, I didn't know who Gary Halbert was at the time, but one of the things in Jay's Your Marketing Genius at Work was a reprint of the Boron letters, which you're probably familiar with. And so, but he didn't say it was Gary Halbert. But when I read through the Boron letters, I said, this is total genius. I got to find out who this guy is. I'm going to call Jay's office and find out his name. But before I had a chance to do that, this thing came in the mail. But in the letter that promoted Gary Halbert's newsletter, and this is when he just first started his newsletter, he talked about Tova Borgnine ad and the perfume ad, and it had the headline right there on the first page. And I recognized that from being in the Boron letters that was printed in Jay Abraham's newsletter. And I said, this is the guy I've been after and wanting to learn from, one of them in any case. So, I immediately called and signed up for a letter, and actually the gal on the phone was his girlfriend at the time, and Paulette. And later, Paulette admitted to me that I was like one of the first people to subscribe. So that was fun. Anyway, so that's kind of how I got started. And I read, whenever Jay would mention a book or Gary would mention a book, I'd get it. And at the time, for example, scientific advertising, I had to research the publisher because it wasn't in the bookstores, it wasn't in my library. So, and we didn't have the internet at the time or Amazon. So I went to the library and I researched who the publisher was, and I got their phone number. I called Crane Books up to order it, and they said, okay, fine, here's how you order. Send us a check for such and such amount of money. I forget what it was, $20, 21 something, with shipping and handling. And when we receive that and the check clears, 4 to 6 weeks later, we'll send it to you.
Can't do that now.
So I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way than that to take an order, And of course I was right. But that was the combination, scientific advertising and my life in advertising. And Jay eventually printed scientific advertising, like I told you, in the newsletter, but it was after I called and ordered the book. But I eventually got the book. I read it cover to cover. One of the greatest books I read is, it's kind of like this archaic, outdated language, but the concepts were there. And I was able to see through that. And that's one of the things that, you had said something that I should talk about, what I'm working on and what I'm passionate about. So what I'm working on and what I'm passionate about are sometimes the same thing, but sometimes very different. And unfortunately, my passion is the classics, copywriting classics. I just love the classic stuff, the old stuff. I was on this webinar one time, and at the end of the webinar, it was with Jim Edwards. And at the end of the webinar, we took questions, and I made this offer, right? So a package of stuff that I sell on my site, scientificadvertising.com. And one of the questions was, isn't that old stuff? and so, I gave a brief answer that I remembered from Jay Abraham giving, introing scientific advertising. And what he said was that human nature is immutable. I never heard of the word immutable before, but in other words, it means it doesn't change. It's not changeable, basic human nature. And what you learn from that, what they learned from that way long ago is really the same. It hasn't changed very much. But then I examined that because I keep justifying why it is that I'm so passionate about these old things. And some are not that old. Some are like, some of the stuff they sell, like Dan Kennedy's older stuff, back, 20, 30 years ago, when he, talked about using audio cassette tapes and answering machines and stuff like that. But there's a magic that's captured in those pages that gets to the heart of things much faster, I think, and it's much easier to learn. So, for example, like when you take a look at, an ad like, they laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, it's an emotional ad. And, we know now that people buy on emotion. They justify with logic and they buy on emotion. Well, you can study emotional things today and try to get the emotional component out of them. But back then, the techniques were more simplified. In other words, when you take a look at, they laughed when I sat down at the piano, it's kind of one particular principle, especially, that really it focuses on in this emotional storytelling kind of a thing. And to me, it's just easier to get the principles out of that than to try to separate it out, separate technology from principles, and boil it down to the basic human nature of what we're dealing with when you're dealing with copywriting. So anyway, that's why I'm passionate about that. I don't make very much money at it. If I did that only, I'd be a pauper. So I have to supplement that with things that I actually make money with. I mean, I make a little money, but it's kind of like coffee money. So my main activity is writing copy for clients and coaching students. So, those, what are the things am I working on? Well, actually, one of the things that I actually can't tell you too much about, but it's one of my own projects that I just started a little while ago, and it's a revolutionary something that is going to revolutionize email. Okay. And it's really amazing because it's based on two principles that are extremely old and not very well used today, if even used at all. Whenever they're used, they're probably used more like just out of happenstance, and they don't even realize exactly what they're doing. But anyway, it's something that I don't see applied in email. And so I think that's going to be a real big thing, but that's a personal project. That doesn't make me any money yet because it's still in development. But so I write copy for clients. I have this one client who's coming out with a new webinar kind of a system that's really focused on the kinds of things you need to focus on in a webinar. I know there are a lot of webinar things out there. This one is high quality, and he's actually got a lot of experience in telecommunications, has a site that's been around for years and years, one of the highest quality services for audio only, and this will combine it with webinar and video. So we're working on that. I do coaching. Occasionally, some of my coaching clients become partners. So, for example, I'm working with one of my coaching clients, partnering on a project for them. I have some clients that I just write copy for whenever they need it. They call me up and, do that.
Yeah.
And then I, just in general, that's the kind of stuff that I do. Mostly writing copy and coaching people on how to write copy.
Yeah, and it's so important, isn't it? But what I'm fascinated about, it's a similar line to you about the classics of the history of copywriting. Guys like Rosser Reeves and Mel Martin, who I don't think he was that long ago, but the old school guys like that, I have a similar interest in them, to you, a similar fascination. But I often wonder, what is the disconnect between the materials that those guys used to put out back then and what we're doing now? Because like you, I thought that sometimes we get lost in the technology and we're in love with the latest new platform rather than the principles of copywriting and marketing. So where do you think the message gets lost in between the two, and how can we bridge that gap?
Well, exactly what I'm addressing, because when there are too many bells and whistles, and there are too many shiny objects that distract your attention and make you think that it's the technology. It's not the technology. The techniques worked when when you had cassette tapes, that you had for audio, when you had VHS tapes for video, or CDs and DVDs, as well as streaming video and audio and downloadable video and audio. You need to separate the technology, and the technology is important. I'm not downplaying technology. I'm not an anti-technology guy. But the principles that you've got to use when you're implementing the technology are things that existed before the technology existed, and you need to separate those out. And the easiest way to separate those out is not to study current stuff, but to study the older stuff. Yeah. Because you'll notice, when Dan Kennedy talks about sending out an audio cassette tape, you know that's not a good technique anymore. But that's not the thing that you need to get from Dan Kennedy telling you to send out an audio tape. It's like you give them the audio, and that helps sell the whatever it is. Okay. In other words, what's the principle behind it? Why do you send them an audio cassette tape? Why do you send them a long sales letter? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? And there, but to be sure, there are new things that you need to implement and learn along with the technology. But until you've got the basics and the foundation, trying to implement the new things and making them work is nearly impossible. I mean, it's possible to do, I suppose. I don't know, because I didn't learn it that way. I learned it the other way in natural progression. But very often what you find is when you get the new stuff, you get somebody regurgitating somebody else who's regurgitating somebody else, etc. You've heard of the telephone game, right? I call it the telephone game effect for anyone who hasn't heard. People sit in a circle, and one whispers to the other, to the one to their left, something, and then that person needs to repeat it to the person to their left, and it goes around the circle. Why it's called a telephone game, I don't know. Probably because it originated, you could do it with a telephone rather than people sitting in a circle. But anyway, when it gets down around to the end, the person whispers it back, what they just were told, and when that went around the circle, and something entirely different, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's never the
Something
same. Yeah.
unrecognizable. That's why when I first subscribed to Jay Abraham's newsletter, I wanted to know his source of the information. Okay, I wanted to know where he got his information from, as well as his information, which was great. But I wanted to know where he got it from. How did he learn this stuff? Who did he learn it from? So whenever you'd mention a book, and Claude Hopkins' Scientific Advertising was one of the first books that he mentioned.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting story, by the way. I think he's told this elsewhere, but we were on a phone conversation one day talking about this kind of stuff. And we were amazed because I think I was telling him that I had this little mastermind group, and we swap tapes and books and stuff, and then discuss it. And I told him, I had this thing that you printed from Napoleon Hill, and it was about oh God, I forget the name of it. Anyway, something from Napoleon Hill. And I said, I just love that thing that you printed in your newsletter. And so what I did is I printed it and I give it to practically everybody. And I get a little feedback back, but some of it, not too much. And he said, I when I first came, this is Jay speaking now.
Yeah.
He said when he first came upon Scientific Advertising, he bought like 50, 60 copies of it and gave it to everybody he knew, friends, clients, etc. And he said, when I checked back later, hardly any of them ever even read the thing. And his explanation was when people get something for free, they don't value it. So
yeah.
They don't give it the value, but also it requires you connecting with the material, and also connecting with it and transcending the oldness of the language, because inside there, like Claude Hopkins is the guy who started free sampling, which we do now. It's like you virtually can't build a list until you give somebody something for free.
Yeah.
Which is contrary to the thing of, them valuing the thing, but it's one way to get them on the list, and then you sell them something, and hopefully they value it at some point. Anyway, so that's where was I going with that?
I don't know. I don't know, but I was enjoying it.
how to learn the principles of the good stuff. You go back to the Robert Collier letter book, and I was the guy who reprinted that in I forget when it's the I don't know. Years ago, I reprinted it. Bought the reprint rights from Prentice Hall, and then I reprinted it and sold copies of it. And hardly anyone came back and said they didn't like it. But I think one person eventually got onto Amazon, and one person on Amazon said, all these letters are old. I can't use any of these letters. Well, it's like that they were examples of a principle that he was applying and using. You weren't supposed to just take the letters and use them
as is. Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of stupid, right? So anyway, that's the kind of thing with the old stuff. It's not that you take it and use it as is, it's that you perceive the underlying principle they're talking about. And it's clearer when it's it's actually clearer when it's a totally different language, which even though it's English, it's kind of an older form of English. They use different terminologies. They didn't call companies, they call them houses or concerns.
Concern is the big one.
So
I noticed.
Yeah, so you kind of have to get a little of that language through. But, they obviously didn't have the internet, but we use Claude Hopkins' principle every day on the internet successfully. Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of hard to not use that principle on the internet and make any kind of a mailing list at all. Even people who've never heard of Claude Hopkins, because they've learned it through 17 other people after that, and they just learned it. Oh, okay, this is how you build a list. This is how you work. They don't know where it came from. And there's a lot more to that, to where it came from. There's a lot more in Claude Hopkins than just that thing, but that may be the only thing they got. So
yeah, and it's funny, the perceptions of new people coming along, and I was one of them at one point. I didn't know any of the classics. There was a time when that was true, but people come along and they say, your writing style is like Frank Kern, but for example, but it's actually what he learned from John Carlton, and John Carlton learned from the classics as well. So what they're actually saying is that they're actually recognizing the classics without even actually being aware of it. So.
right.
But in a much different format, like the telephone game. It's so different in a lot of ways from what the creators originally set it out as. You've really got to go back and look at the old stuff to get the true picture.
Right, exactly. I mean, let's face it. If you wanted to be a playwright, would you not study Shakespeare? If you're an English lit major, would you not study Chaucer? If you're a writer, you'd study people like, Charles Dickens, Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah.
If you wanted to write horror novels, you'd study Stephen King. And there's an example. Stephen King. They recently they're doing they did a movie, I think. It's already done. It's based on his 1986 novel, which was called It, and they just released it. It cost them $35 million to make, and so far it's made $700 million. And it's an old novel. It's 1986.
Yeah.
I think everyone would agree. It's a 96, 06, 16. Okay, we're talking about 33 years old. So, that's old, right? I mean, let's face it, when David Ogilvy discovered Claude Hopkins was old then. But it still worked. When J. Abraham discovered Claude Hopkins was old. David Ogilvy was old too. But the stuff still works. And, if you want to study something, you study the masters. If you want to write romance novels, you study Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Steinbeck, Thoreau, Tolstoy, for other things. Even some of the recent successful writers like James Patterson, George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones, J.K. Rowling, for Harry Potter, and even Tolkien for Lord of the Rings. As a writer, if you want to be a really good writer, one of the things you do is you study the classic writers, and you study the top writers, the ones who are successful, because you want to know, you want to study their work because you want to study something successful.
And it's been they've been more successful than anything. It keeps adding up because not only were they successful back in the day, but they're also successful through the re-implementation of everybody modeling what they do in modern times.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the ultimate success.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder who J.K. Rowling learned from, who Tolkien learned from, who George R.R. Martin or James Patterson, who they learned from. Actually, James Patterson, I think, did one of the master classes, and I haven't actually done that yet, but I'm planning to
that would be an interesting one.
Link into that and learn what he has to say about, and hopefully how he who he studied to learn from. But I guarantee you it wasn't one of his contemporaries only. He probably studied contemporaries, but I'm sure he studied.
But the deep principles come from the masters.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and that's true across the board with every top expert. They know their history. They don't ask a question on a webinar like they don't ask a question like, isn't that old stuff? They might ask that, but if the answer is yes, then that's great because I love the old stuff. So,
Right.
That's the key to success in the modern masters,
Hmm.
those who came before them.
Right. Exactly. And I'm not saying you shouldn't study the new stuff as well,
Yeah, of
but
course.
you're going to get the foundations and the basics of the stuff a bit better when it's more simplified.
Mm.
It's like when I went to college, I actually studied engineering, which is very science
Yeah.
intensive. And one of the things that I learned in science, when you study science and and how they teach it in college and high school even, uh, is that you separate out the principles from the other stuff. And you just work on the basic principle and study the basic principle. So when you're studying motion, for example, in science, you don't take into account friction because that complicates the whole thing, complicates the formula. Leave that to college when you have differential equations and calculus, right? But when you first learn it, what you're learning is, force equals mass times acceleration. You simplify the formula. Now that formula doesn't actually work unless you take into account friction, but it works in general. It works well enough to get you into the ballpark and to move you to the next step. If you haven't learned that first, trying to learn calculus and differential equations and the physics that relate to that is impossible until you've learned the basics. So, and that's where I think a lot of people go wrong, is they try to learn just from contemporary people and take a course that somebody just did and put together, and they probably gloss over a principle or present it as if they invented the principle when it was actually Claude Hopkins and who did it, and actually explained it better if you read Claude Hopkins or Robert Collier. Sorry, they're
that's fine.
The leaf blowers are going on outside. I don't know if you could hear that or not.
That's fine.
If you could, if you study them, the old guys, the classics, it's just you get the why. There are two books that Claude Hopkins wrote. I mean, he wrote more than two, but the two main books are Scientific Advertising, which is where he laid down the principles basically, and then My Life in Advertising, which is essentially an autobiography, which tells you how he came upon those principles. And so that's almost even more an important book than Scientific Advertising, because scientific advertising gives you the principles, but My Life in Advertising tells you how he came to discover those principles. And that's, I think, even more valuable. So both are equally good.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, that's how you get all the cookie cutter marketing that they see nowadays. Everyone just copies each other, and they just implement something they think should work, but it's really just copying from whatever guru they're following, and they don't know the principles behind it, so they don't know the individual subtle nuances of each part. So there's always going to be some part of that not quite aligned with the audience, and so it doesn't really work as well as they hope.
Exactly, and knowing the why of things is even more important than knowing the what. Knowing the what tells you, okay, here's how it ends up. And you could say, well, why should I know how it came to be this way?
Yeah.
It's because there's so many variations that can go on that you need to know how it came to be that way so you can figure out how to adjust for those variations. And when someone does something and it doesn't work, even today, even people who've studied the old guys, the classics, when something doesn't work, you go back to the classics and you say, okay, how did he come across it? Okay, here's how he came across. Oh, now I see why this doesn't work. Okay.
Yeah. This is something that I really got out of because I just spoke at an event in Europe with Drayton Bird, and obviously he's been in the game for about I don't know, 500 years. And David Ogilvy, as you know, said he's one of the smartest guys in marketing. But that's what I got out of. He did a couple of presentations there. So the principles behind why he did everything. Some pretty entertaining stories as well. But exactly along the lines of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you then connect that to training and coaching new copywriters? Because if it's one thing you're well known for, like you just mentioned, it's training new copywriters. I'm sure I had one of your courses or the DVDs of it around the time when I was first starting out. As you mentioned, you're big on training and coaching copywriters. So how do you make sure that they're digesting and understanding the principles to a deep enough level, as well as all the new tactics?
Well, when I first started out doing coaching, what I do is I just get someone on the phone once or twice a week, and I'd discuss a principle and then have them go do something with that, and then they come back and they write something up, and then I critique it, and based on the principle, I understand what they missed or what they didn't get out of it or needed to get out of it, and then we go over that and then continue on from there. So there was no actually hard and fast step-by-step procedure. It was just what you needed to learn, because everybody starts at a different place. Okay, some people have more knowledge than others. Well, everybody doesn't have the same knowledge level of knowledge. They have different varying levels. So what I consider my job as a coach is, and it's unlike motivational coaches, where a motivational coach, they're just trying to motivate you to do what you know how to do. But in copywriting coaching, you got to motivate people as well. But in addition, you have to teach, and you have to teach them the next thing that they need to learn, the most important thing they need to learn for the level of knowledge that they're at. And so that's what you work on and try to work on. And so I did this for a couple years with dozens and dozens of students. I forget how many, over 100. And after a couple of years, I kind of knew the gist of what they needed to know, or a group. And I did an in-person seminar, and we recorded that, and that became the video audio transcript version of my Copywriter Protege program, which started out as just a coaching program. And when somebody signed up for it, and at the time it was a couple $1,000s a year. So you could, that was a real bargain, but still a couple $1,000s is a couple $1,000. And so what they got at that time was, essentially nothing. So I, that was the plan, because it was all done on the phone. But I thought, I got to send them something. It's nice to get a package in the mail. So I assembled a little. I called it my first package of goodies, and I just put some things together and sent it to them. But that wasn't actually the course. That was just like research material or things to back up the stuff. But then when I did the Copywriter Protege program with the video and the audio, that's what I sent them. And then I'd get on the phone coaching them after they'd gone through it. Hopefully, not everybody did, but after they had gone through it, and I'd be able to point out things that they had learned on the video or on the videos, and they'd get an epiphany. Oh, okay, that's how you. Because when you watch something, when you go through a training program, you don't get all of it, right? You kind of have to go through it over and over again, which is why Jay Abraham said he read Scientific Advertising 50 or 60 times, and I probably read it at least that much as well. And a lot of people I know who study it, they keep rereading those old classics and stuff, especially, scientific advertising
Yeah.
and my life in advertising. And one of the best ways to get that actually is if you have something on audio, because whenever you come on something that's really good, you want to repeat it, because repetition is the best way to learn anything. And certainly anything that's semi-complex, which is, advertising is kind of a complex kind of thing that involves psychology and
Yeah.
studying human behavior and writing and all that good stuff. So whenever you come across anything really good, repetition helps. And that's a whole other seminar. But the easiest way, when I started out, what I used to do is I used to go for things that are on audio, and I put them in the car, in those days, audio cassette tapes, and I listened to them on the way of commuting. In those days, when I first got started, I was also doing work. When I originally got started, I was working as, what was I working as? Programmer, I think, computer programmer. I was, I know I was working this one time for Merck, which is a pharmaceutical industry, and they were about an hour, 15 minutes away from my house, an hour and a half on a bad day. And so I'd throw a tape in there. This is before I became a full-time copywriter, and I'd put in a tape. And let's say it was Gary Halbert, and he did a tape series of his first, I think, 6 newsletters. And I'd listen to it during that hour and a half commute each way. So I had like 3 hours, 2.5 to 3 hours worth of commuting time when I could listen to his tapes. And I quickly got through all, I think there were 6 hours.
Yeah.
Obviously, it only takes a few days. And then, just kind of like, well, lazy, I'll listen to them again, right? And then I'd listen to it again. And then I get to it, and I'd repeat that until I got sick of it. And then I put in another tape series and listen to that until I got sick of that. And then I'd say, oh, let me go back to see how Halbert is. Eventually I get back to Halbert and listen to that again. And every time I listen to it, I learn something new. So it just shows you how much is in that material. So anyway, getting back to my Copywriter Protege program, in essence, it had all of the things that I learned that copywriters needed to know. Now, there are probably some things that, in addition to that, that you need to know. I'm sure there are, but they form kind of like a good basic structure and foundation for the things.
Yeah.
So what people would do is they'd go through the videos or listen to the audios and stuff, and then they'd call me, and we'd critique something of theirs. And eventually that became another part of my coaching business, which is working with existing copywriters and doing what I call the co-write from the beginning. And so what we do is they get on the phone and we brainstorm the idea, come up with maybe some possible headlines and subheads and offers and things like that. So 2 heads work much better than 1, so it's oftentimes if you can work together and understand the same basic principles. And then they'd go back and write their copy, and then come back and we'd critique it and go over things and go back and forth like that. And so that became, another arm of my coaching business, not just teaching copywriting, but also just co-writing with existing copywriters. So, and that, I know what question do we start off with to get to here? I don't know.
I don't know, but I like where it went anyway. I don't think that people mind too much about us going off on tangents like this, because it's very informative, and I think you're sharing a lot of great stuff which people are really valuing.
Yeah. And, another thing that I think people are concerned about is we're now moving into the video era. I mean, we've been moving for quite some time.
Yeah.
More and more of people learn about things from video. I think YouTube has crept up on Google as the main search engine, maybe even exceeded it by this time. I keep hearing, words either way on those, but certainly competitive with it. And I think people find it much easier to watch a video than to read a sales letter. But what I also find is that when I'm shopping for something myself online, and I've had this experience where someone is selling something. There's one guy selling some software that I really love almost everything that he puts out, and I usually buy it. But he only does videos, and I just introduced this to one of my partners, and I said, "You need this software," and I gave her a link to it. And she went to it, and it's just only a video. I prefer having a sales letter so I can scan the sales letter and pick out what kinds of things that I want. So I'm not saying you should give up video and go to a sales letter, but you should supplement your video with the sales letter. And the sales letter can be, even just a basic transcript reformatted into looking good as a sales letter, and maybe putting additional information that wasn't in the video or whatever. But don't think of one having to supplant the other. Just like when radio came along, everyone said, "Oh, it's going to kill the newspaper industry," and it didn't kill the newspaper industry. It became a thing of itself, and the newspaper industry just supplemented. When TV came along, they said, "Oh, that's the end of radio. Why would anyone just want to listen to something when they could see and listen?" But then radio became, that's the thing you listen to in your car, on transistor radio in those days, portable radios, or on your phone. And when the internet came along, the internet, we don't need TV anymore. To some extent, that's true, but people still watch TV, and they still watch, of course, video. And in the early days, you couldn't get video on the internet. Now we can because of the technology increase. Just like in the early days of mail order, it was questionable whether you should use color in your copy because it increased the expense so much. But with the internet, it doesn't increase the expense at all. So we know that, obviously colors is helpful in some ways, but if you overdo it, like anything, if you overdo it, it just weakens it. And this is something that I teach my copywriters. I tell them, simple is often better. So if you have to use an adverb or an adjective to modify a noun or a verb, the more of those you use, the weaker your argument is because you've used too many. Use one or three, and try it out with zero and see which one's the better one. So, sometimes when you put too many adverbs or adjectives, it just weakens the verb or the noun. So you have to experiment with that, and you have to just see, okay, which is more powerful. Simpler words are more powerful. You use a three-syllable word instead of a one-syllable word. Think about that. Just say both to yourself and see which is more powerful. I think most cases you're going to find that the simpler word is more powerful. Now, sometimes you want to throw in a big word because you want to exercise your credentials in knowing the complexity of something. But if you write your whole thing like that, it's going to fall on its face. You use it sparingly, and that's what I think people have the hardest time with, sparingly. It's like when they learn something new, they want to do everything that way. It's like, just be selective. It's more powerful if you're selective than if you just spray it all over the place.
True. And that's one of the biggest things that one of the biggest challenges copywriters have when they're learning the craft.
When they're learning what?
The craft of copywriting.
Oh, the crux? Crux. Is that crux?
Craft.
Oh, craft. I'm sorry. Sorry, I misheard you.
No,
craft. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a slight accent. It threw me off.
Yeah.
Craft. Yes. Yes. Definitely the craft of copywriting in my American vernacular. Craft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. That does throw people off in anything, but copywriting is a microcosm of that, and certainly, relevant. Let me introduce that thing that I was going to say I was going to do at the end, and this doesn't have to be the end, but I just
I was
want
just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
to throw it in. So what I said is I'm going to show you how to be a better copywriter, or a better writer in general, and give you something that's better than money. So this ought to be really interesting. And actually, this is the first time I'm actually, dispensing either of these two things. So
Okay,
this is
nice.
like new information. It was actually new for me.
Can't wait.
So anyway, okay, the first thing is how to be a better writer. And this I learned from Jerry Seinfeld, okay? Actually, I didn't learn it directly from Jerry Seinfeld because I don't know Jerry, but I've seen all of his comedies. And I learned it on lifehacker.com. It's lifehacker.com/Jerry-Seinfeld with an S -productivity -secret oh God, something else. I don't know. Just go to Lifehacker.
Probably Google it, yeah.
Or Google Jerry Seinfeld productivity secret. Okay. All right. So when he was asked by this guy Brad Isaac on what makes a good copywriter, a good comic writer, by the way, not copywriter. Way to be a better comic. And so he said that the way to be a better comic is to create better jokes. And the way to create better jokes was to write every day. Okay. So, and then he went on to explain how he did it. And what he did was he got a big wall calendar, the kind that shows a whole year on a page, and you hang it on a prominent wall. And then the next step was to get a big red magic marker. And he said that every day that he did his task of writing, he put a big red X over that day. And after a few days, you'll have a chain, okay, of these red marks. And you keep at it, and the chain grows, and longer every week or every day that you go along. And then he said, and you could hear, I'm sure you can hear Jerry Seinfeld and how he says things. Don't break the chain. And so that's basically it. If you want to be a good writer, a good copywriter, a good comic writer, good any kind of writer, and probably good anything, do it every day. So even if you have to write for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, write every day. If you remember you've got to do it and you haven't done it, and you're standing in line to get coffee, take out your phone and get out your notepad on your phone and write something. Write it down. Do it every day, because and I found this to be true even before I discovered Jerry Seinfeld's technique for doing this, is that the more you write, the better you get at it. So if you want to be a better copywriter, start writing copy, and write copy every day, and continue to write copy, and just continue writing copy. You'll get better the more you do it. What I think holds people up is they say, well, I need to know how to do it correctly, and so I need to study this person. Yes, you do need to know how to do it correctly, but you also need to do it. And there's the thing. I mean, you can't do one or the other. It's like you can't just study the old people and study the new people. You got to do both. So you can't just learn about copywriting and write, you got to do both. So you got to do both every day. And so you got to study something. So devote some time, a portion of your day, even if it's a small portion, if you're busy, even a small portion, write a little bit or a lot or as much as you can, and then study as much as you can, but include those two things in every day, and you will
Yeah.
eventually get to be a top-notch copywriter or writer of any kind. Now,
Yeah.
the second thing was, the second one was, what is better than money? Okay, and Jerry Seinfeld did an interview with Bob Roth from the David Lynch Foundation. It's on YouTube. It's called Success Without Stress. It was on Sirius XM satellite radio. You can go to YouTube and listen to that, watch that, actually watch and listen to it at the same time. And it's a little over an hour long. And it's not about this technique that I just gave you. It's about transcendental meditation and how he uses it to do his work, to do comedy and writing, get through the day and whatever. And one of the things that he said in there is he says that whenever he feels tired, it's either because he hasn't done his transcendental meditation, TM he calls it, of course, abbreviates it, or he has to do his TM to get the energy back. So what I'm telling you is that writing, when you write, you're going to get tired. You're gonna write, and then it's going to make you tired because it's actually an energy sensitive activity, and how you get your energy back is to there are different techniques. Now, David Ogilvy talked about you just get up and do something else. He said have a shot of brandy, or no, it wasn't brandy. It was something more sophisticated than brandy. What is it, man? Something like sherry. That's what it is. Have a shot of sherry or whatever. And that's an old creative technique. James Webb Young, famous copywriter, David Ogilvy said was one of the best copywriters of all time, wrote a book called The Technique for Ideas, Technique for Producing Ideas. Yeah, and in that he explains that whole creative procedure. I first learned it from a little booklet called Turbocharge Your Writing by Joe Vitale. But it's an old technique, and I think Clark also wrote it in Brainstorming. What it is that when you do whatever activity in a focused, concentrated way, and then when you kind of hit the wall, you just get up and do something else. You relax, go do something else, put it away for a day or two if you can, and then get back to it. So anyway, that doesn't give you the what's better than money, but Jerry in this interview said that he considers energy to be the thing that he seeks out, that he wants, not money. Of course, money's good. He likes that. He wants that too. But energy to him is more important than money, because when you have energy, you can get money. And when you know how to increase your energy, and his method is using transcendental meditation, which is just the simplest form of meditation. Sit down quietly, feet on the floor, just sort of get quiet for 15 to 20 minutes, okay? It revitalizes you. He said he did that before his stand-up routines, and over the years he's done that. And of course, for someone who's had one of the longest running comedy shows in history, that kind of says a lot. So I never thought I'd learn about copyright, how to be a better copywriter from Jerry Seinfeld, but these are two things. And he says that that's better than money. So, and he ought to know because he's got both.
True. He's a smart man, because one of the other interviews that I heard with Jerry many years ago, I'm glad you mentioned him, because he said in this other interview that this is about editing. It's not quite related to what you were just talking about, but he would make a good copywriter as well, because he said to this interviewer, I can't remember who it was, but he said, I'll spend an hour editing an 80-word joke down to 5 or 10 words if I can. So, which is a very important principle of copywriting editing. So. That's something that I picked up from him many years ago too.
Yeah, in fact, in the writing industry, and it just goes to another thing. If you want to be a good copywriter, don't study just copywriting stuff. Study
Yeah.
writing as well.
Yeah.
Um, and and so in the writing industry in general, what they there's this phrase. It's called "writing is rewriting," and what that basically means is that the first thing you put down is not what you're going to end up
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
You have to edit and rewrite and edit. And I think beginning writers don't realize how much of this that you actually have to do, and how much of it never comes out the first time. You just basically get you get it out. I have a thing I teach people in my course on how to go about doing that. There's like actually a procedure in how you start out doing that, and it eliminates writer's block and all that good stuff. But the basic thing is that you've got to edit your stuff, and you got to do a lot of editing. And I think most writers just don't realize how much editing actually goes into the final thing. And
Yeah. True. There's an art form to it.
yeah.
So what else can you tell us about the copywriting process as you see it, training your proteges and all of that? So,
Well, one of the things that I learned from some screenwriters, and one of the little known facts in the world is that I went to film school. And we had this this period where we'd invite a bunch of experts in the field to come and speak, and I think it was in conjunction with a film, like a film event, okay, where student films were shown and other films. Anyway, we had these screenwriters there, and one of them, I forget his name. This famous screenwriter. The names escape me, but people probably recognize it from. He used to be a lawyer, and when he was a lawyer, how he wrote his screenplays was he got up real early in the morning, and I think it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and he started writing until he had to take the kids to school at around 8 o'clock or whenever. And then go to his lawyer job, his legal job, and he became a famous screenwriter. And I wish I could remember his name because in the movies, but it's down somewhere. The details escape me. But anyway, so this was a little talk that he gave that I actually filmed the talk. So I actually have him on tape somewhere. I got to dig that out, where he says this. And later on, this other screenwriter who used to be the head of the Screenwriters Guild and did Beverly Hills Cop. Now, if you look that up, you'll find out. Actually, I should probably look that up anyway. Beverly Hills Cop screenwriter. And it's going to tell me Daniel Petrie. Yeah, Daniel Petrie. So Daniel Petrie spoke after him, and after he spoke, he said, I have a similar technique. I get up at 4 or 5 every day, and then I have my dinner. So his technique was that, instead of getting up 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, he got up 4 or 5, and that was his best time to write. 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and that was his best time to write. So everybody has their best time to write. You just have to figure out what that is and write, as well as the best method of writing. Some people prefer writing it out in their own hand on a on paper. Pen and paper or pencil and paper, whatever. Gary Halbert was like that. He had to do everything on paper, pen
Yeah.
and paper.
Yeah.
Um, but other people do it on the computer, and if that's, you just have to try out which way is better. I usually use a combination of the two, and for ideas, for example, I do mind mapping. If you're familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's one of the creative techniques that I use, and very often I'll just do that on a sheet of blank copy paper. Um, One is copy, not as in copywriter, but
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
in copying machine or printer paper, unlined paper on a clipboard, and I'll just do my own version of a mind map. Turns out that my version of a mind map is not the official version of a mind map, but I like mine better, and it serves me well. So I do it my way. And then what I do from that is I take a look at the mind map, and then I start writing. And I could write on paper, but the reason I don't do that anymore, I used to do that and then transcribe it, but I thought the whole transcription process was a bit awkward, and I used up too much paper, and was starting to get to be an organization problem, because I like to save every piece of paper that I've ever done, and it got to be overwhelming after a while. So I now do it on computer, and also it helps with the editing process because you preserve it. That being said, there was a value that I kind of miss by not writing it out in hand from the mind map as well, and then transferring it to computer, because it gives me one more step in editing. But you could do that on a computer, just need to have a little bit of discipline. So you do it on the computer, and then you edit and you edit and you edit, and you're going to do more than one edit anyway. So that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. So where do we go from here? Did you say you were going to share your screen at one point for something?
Yeah. Actually, if you show my screen, I will.
Now you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I have to share my screen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Just
If anyone,
let me.
if anyone's listening on iTunes, then you have to find this episode on YouTube. But yeah, go ahead and do that, and I'll tell you when I can see it.
Okay, let's see if I can do this properly. Share. Okay, should be there any second. Can you see Jerry Seinfeld?
Not yet.
No. Okay. You see anything on my screen? According to this, it says I'm sharing my screen. Oh, start video? No.
No. Let me check the. It says you should be able to share, so I don't know what exactly you're seeing.
Let me try unsharing it and then sharing it again. So let's try this way. Okay. Okay. It says I am sharing it. You see anything yet?
No, nothing's coming through. It's not sharing right now. I can tell you that much. It's not sharing.
All right. Well, according to this, it says it is, but I believe you.
Because I'm literally not seeing it otherwise.
Right. Okay. Well, so I guess I can't share my screen, so that's okay. I can just tell you what I was just going to put up the YouTube video. It's called Bob Roth Interviews Jerry Seinfeld on Success Without Stress. And I was also going to give you my website, a couple websites. My main website for me is carlgalletti.com. But if you go to carlgalletti.com/about me, all lowercase, no spaces, about me, there's a short bio there, which you can read and find out a little more about me. And my main site for my classics, the thing that keeps me in, I'd like to
Coffee
say
money.
coffee money, but it's like, well, it takes, I don't know how long before there's enough coffee money to actually buy a coffee, but there's a little coffee money there. Anyway, is scientificadvertising.com. And even if you have scientific advertising already, you should fill in the opt-in below. You'll get another copy of it, of course.
Yeah.
But you'll get my version, which has a few illustrations thrown in at the proper place where he talks about something and it shows the illustration.
Yeah.
So once you get that, once you sign up for that, not only will you get scientific advertising, but once a month I send out a newsletter called Carl Galletti's Internet Marketing Newsletter, which kind of brings people up to date on the latest happening on internet marketing. It's usually about a 37, this month's issue is a 37 page newsletter. Now, eventually I'm going to get it to where when you sign up, you get scientific advertising, one of the new newsletters, one a sample newsletter, which I used to charge $27 a month for. I don't charge anymore. As long as you're on my list, you get a free copy every month. It's a substantial newsletter, 37 pages, so substantial. And then some more stuff, but I'm in the process of redesigning that, and but it's on an as I get time to do it basis, so it's not going to be for a while. But you will get the newsletter on a monthly basis.
Yeah, so I'm going to put links up to all of this, and if you're listening on iTunes here, go to Geniuses of Copywriting website, and Carl's episode will be on there with all these links. So we've got carlgalletti.com, we've got scientificadvertising.com, and that's where the where you can sign up for the scientific advertising book and lots of other stuff. And I've got this, I found on YouTube, this Bob Roth interviews Jerry Seinfeld on success without stress.
Great.
So I've got the interview up there.
You should also, what? I'll send you the link on this on the Life Hacker article with Jerry Seinfeld productivity secret, or maybe you could just search.
Yeah, I can just Google that.
Jerry Seinfeld. That's the Life Hacker thing. Might even come up with some other good information on it. I'm just going to search that myself. Yeah, it's the first thing right there that comes up if you put Jerry Seinfeld's productivity secret.
Yeah, this is all great stuff. So, so yeah, that's cool. So I appreciate that. There's got some great stuff there. I watched this interview as well. We've got scientific advertising and carlgalletti.com as well. But scientific advertising is the one to go to get the book.
Right. Let me mention one more thing, copycoach.com. That's where I do my coaching program. Copycoach.com.
Okay, haven't seen that one yet, but yeah. Yeah, I'll put up some links to all this stuff because this is really good. And yeah, it's a good looking site as well, good copy. And so you're one of the best known people that I know of in the industry, along with people like David Deutsch and David Garfinkel, who are really known for coaching and creating other successful copywriters. So this is why I want to share these resources with all the listeners as much as possible, so they can take advantage of your expertise. So, I mean, what you've talked about on this call has been absolutely amazing, and I've taken my notes, and I'll be getting the transcription and everything. But to really dive deep with you, you've got copycoach.com, scientificadvertising.com as well. So I think those are your 2 contact points for more information, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I strongly recommend that anyone who's listening to this go and sign up with you as soon as possible and get that sorted, because it's very, very worth it. You're definitely a genius of copywriting, and I appreciate everything that you shared on the call today. It's been one of the most valuable ones that we've had so far. So I'd like to thank you very much for that.
Well, you're welcome. I hope I was informative and people learned something.
Yeah. Even I learned stuff on these calls. Like I didn't know Jerry Seinfeld actually was that much into meditation that he did all the time, and he must have been doing it for many years now. But you'll find out in the interview, because he talks about that. He's been doing it before Seinfeld came out. Wow, that's really interesting.
The TV show.
Yeah. All right. So again, this is very valuable. I'm glad that we could get together and do this. So I appreciate that. Again, if you're listening on iTunes, go to copycoach.com, scientificadvertising.com. Those 2 sites where you can get more info on Carl and potentially work with him. It's also carlgalletti.com, and I'll also throw these links up on the website at geniusesofcopywriting.com. So thanks once more. I really appreciate this. We'll have to have you back on the show sometime.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Geniuses of Copywriting with Brian Casangina. To get the full transcript and all the resources mentioned on today's show, go to www.geniusesofcopywriting.com now.